Welcome to Infor. This is the XA NetLink sneak peek. My name is David Foster. I'm a product manager on the System I team. Because this is not released yet, this is still in development, I'm adding the full disclaimer, recognizing that these are what we plan to release within the time frame that we plan to release it. But at the same time, this is a disclaimer that talks about the commitment that we're making. So let's begin with what the objectives were of this whole NetLink project. The big things were to fill the functional gaps, basically provide the editors for customizations for views, subsets, sorts, so on and so forth in NetLink, very similar to the functions that were in Power or are in PowerLink. We were very successful in achieving that. In some cases, we went above and beyond and actually came out with new features that apply to NetLink, and in most cases will not be retrofitted to PowerLink. We wanted to be able to have the ability of exporting views and objects from NetLink. And then we also wanted to add features previously available only in PowerLink, but we wanted to do things like improve the interface. As we're going through a lot of the functions in PowerLink, there's lots of pop-ups, lots of tabs, lots of various steps and flows you need to go through. So we wanted to be able to consolidate those and take advantage of the web screen layout and properties within Mingle, which we did. And then we want to improve the layouts. We want to minimize the number of tabs we have. We want to be able to consolidate cards and really look crisper and cleaner. And I think we achieved that. I think you'll see that as we're going through that. And then finally, we wanted to do some enhancements. We wanted to do custom definitions. We wanted to do maintenance history, where used and last used. Specifically, what we're talking about here is that we want to be able to maintain the history on the activities or maintenance on any of the definitions. So if you create a view, if you create a subset, we want to see who created it, when did they create it, what it looks like. So that's going to be available as well. And then finally, something we've all been waiting for is the direct export to Excel. We're there. These are the things that, this is the scope, architectural scope of what we're working on. The user definition editors, and what this means is we now, or we will, have the ability to edit things like views and subsets and sorts. We'll have the ability of temporary subsets, cascading subsets, and I'll go into more detail there. We'll be able to create and maintain card files and cards, including the gamut of overview, related, application, all the card types we have now. And we have a WYSIWYG-like editor for compound cards and overview. Makes it super easy now to create it because you can see what it's going to look like as you're creating it. Of course, we brought over workspaces and templates. We put together a ton of mass change templates. That's a new concept. We now have a template for mass change. Presentation schemas are here, and of course, favorites. Export, this is going to be nice. We can do direct to Excel, HTML, and text, as well as exporting objects. From a preference standpoint, we have object and application from a global perspective. From a user standpoint, we have user preferences that we can maintain. And what we've done, and you'll see as we're going through some of these, is that we've actually consolidated them so that if you want to make main browser preference changes, you don't need to go back to the main browser, okay? Some of the new user definitions, things like where used, maintenance history, as I mentioned, and then last used, and we'll actually show a video of that. The data tables, the filter row, all right, we now have ad hoc reporting capability built into NetLink, or we will when it's released. We can do things like resize and rearrange on the fly, much like we did in PowerLink. We also have something new. We're calling it freeze columns. And this would be a case where, let's say you're looking at a list view and you have maybe 40 columns across, and you want to freeze the first 2 or 3 columns and then scroll the remainders. We'll actually see a video of that. We're going to have tip text, much like is in PowerLink. We're going to have various styles, and I'll explain this as we go into the styles. Document controls in terms of attachments and those kinds of things. Things that we're not working at is not part of this project are workbenches, the IDF report writer, and the client link. Now let me talk a little bit about workbenches. As we go through this and we look at the various styles, and we're going to have something called a split screen, and I'm going to reference workbenches with the split screen and explain how that can work as well as or quite frankly better than what you can do with workbenches. So we've already delivered a lot of stuff through point releases. When 9.2.2 is released, all these will be available. Some of the biggies is the ability to create a purchase order from a requisition in NetLink. I think that's huge. We can maintain the routing operations. We can now begin using the S-number builder in CSM under PowerLink. We can do things like close the manufacturing order by going through that little wizard. And we can also, all over the place, check component availability for multiple selected items, which makes it nice. The next major release, when you'll see all of this, is going to be release 10, which is planned for mid-2021. You'll see enormous number of mass actions, user definitions and preferences I discussed, bill of material overviews, icon management. And again, what's not going to be in this are things like compare and drag and drop. Now let's move into the demo portion of this. These are the various videos that I'm going to use to demonstrate each one of these functions. I'm going to begin with personalizing the view grid. This is going to be where we can go in and change the width and the location of columns. It's also going to show that we have the ability to manage our favorites by setting, manage our subsets by setting favorites, and set a few favorites. Then we're going to go in and look at them all. Ad hoc query, this is the filter row. This is what we've all been waiting for. So we now can do an ad hoc as ad hoc report or ad hoc query as we're going through that. We're going to look at creating subsets so that we can actually do this, and all this is going to be done in NetLink. We're going to personalize the view. So we're actually going to go in and personalize it. The fifth video is going to be exporting to Excel. This is quite awesome, and we did a really good job of doing this. When we export, we're going to export some of the icons that we used in the records. We're going to talk about and look at mass change. We're going to look at styles, and I think you'll be very impressed. And I think you'll see that that this is a good replacement for some of the workbenches. Definitions history, and then finally preferences. Let's begin by personalizing the view grid. In this video, we're going to notice that we have our columns numbered. This is going to be our sort sequence. So we're sorting first on the planner, then the warehouse, then the item. We're now going to go in and we're going to change the width of the columns. We're going to relocate a column. And if I can bring your attention to the top of the page, you notice that we have drop-down boxes for our view and our subset. So we have all of our various views, all of our various subsets that we can go to. We have the ability of customizing now views, subsets, sorts, cards, card files. If you'll notice, we also have preference and global preference. This has been moved into from the main browser. It's now throughout the list views. So let's take a look at a subset. These are our subsets. We can go in and we can select favorites by very similar to the way we do it in PowerLink. So we simply select our favorites. Okay, so we have our favorite selected. We'll continue from here, and we'll notice now when we look at the drop-down box that we have all of our favorites that we selected, and we also have all definitions. So we can get to all of them still, but just have it minimized to the ones that we want to see or use regularly. You notice that we have the box here in NetLink. We've added a few choices here. We've added Cascade, which I'll talk to in a moment, and we're going to show the filter row. This is where we're going to have our ad hoc in NetLink. So we'll go up and select the filter row. And as we look at the filter row, we notice that we can select on the left-hand side of the field, we can select the operands that we want to use, greater than, less than, is empty or contains. It knows what type of field we're dealing with, so it's going to give us the options associated with that. As we flip over and we look at description, we'll notice that it's going to be a text field, and so we have slightly different choices. The contains and does not contains, begins with, and those kinds of things. So we're going to do a search on tubing, and it brings us in all the results. Now we're going to go through and we get a right mouse click, and we're going to customize the subset. This is going, or subset criteria. This is going to take us into the more advanced subset definition, so we can do things like the operand types, the list, the field value, the range, even the prompt for values. Now, what we just saw was we saw the filter row close or disappear. And what happens is when we're using the filter row, it's going to be displayed as long as we're using it. But when we go in and we select a subset, the subset is going to override the filter row. So it's going to close the filter row as the subset opens. Okay. The next area we're going to go to is we're going to take a look at cascade. So we're basically going to cascade a couple of subsets. And what this means is we're going to run a subset, and then we're going to run a secondary subset. So a subset within a subset. So the first one may return us 1,000, and then the next one might return us 100 rows. Two ways to do this is we can go in and we can select a subset. Then we can hit the control key and then select another subset. And you'll see a plus sign on the left-hand side of the subsets to tell you that this is a cascaded subset. So let's watch that. Watch that. So this is a subset within a subset. The next topic is going to be creating subsets. So let's begin with a preview of creating subsets in PowerLink. We're going to select subsets. We're going to choose the one we want to use. We're going to select it and then create new, or click on new, and that's basically going to make a copy of an existing subset. We then can check our fields. We can add fields, of course we can. We can do searches. We can determine exactly what's displayed as far as the name and the length and the data type. Let me stop for a moment here. As we look at these, we can put the name and the length and the data type up there in PowerLink. But other than for information, it doesn't provide us much more than that. However, you'll see that that's going to be different in NetLink as we get into that. Under here, the subset available attributes by view name. This allows us to go in and actually select field columns or fields by looking at another view. So if there's a view that we want to use as our subset columns, then we can go in and look at that. And it allows us to use some of those and then do some others if that's necessary. So we can do our full search. We can look at it by object. Now this is an interesting point because this changes quite a bit as we move into NetLink. You'll see that this is actually displayed differently. The capability is there, but I think it's a little bit cleaner and crisper as we're looking in NetLink. We'll see that in just a moment. We now move over. And notice also there are multiple tabs. So in this case, we select various tabs in the relational operator. And you'll see a difference. Now let's step into NetLink. We're now looking at NetLink. We can see that as we create the subsets, the option is there. Looks a little bit different at this point, but we have all of our public, private, and favorites. We have our descriptions. We also have a domain and security. Now, these are subsets that we created without domains or security information, so it knows there's nothing there. Notice that we can sort these by columns now by simply selecting the column. The answer set, if you will, in this, the number of records we have is relatively low. So that's a good function to have when you have a low number of records. So again, we can show the filter row. We have filter row capability anytime there's a list card. And you can see we don't have anything in there, so those are blank. We're going to now do a search. We can create. We now see a very similar presentation of us creating a subset. If you'll notice at the top, we can also create schemas from here, as well as having various messages and formatting this. Search capability. We can show our filter row again. Now we have name and length that we can search on. We also have data type. Now here's something that's kind of interesting about this as we look at it. A lot of these things, if we can do a free form search, you're going to see a field here. If they're pre-populated and we do a drop-down box, you'll still see the selection here for the operand, but you're not going to see an open field, so you can't type anything in there. You just go through and do a selection. If you're familiar with these kind of selections in Excel, then you'll be quite comfortable with that. But we can search on all the various descriptions, the object, and let me talk about that. What we saw in PowerLink was a hierarchy. We now have a list. So we're able to achieve the same thing, and it just makes it very clean and crisp as you're going through that. Here we can select multiple and look in multiple objects. So we can select them all or unselect them or select the few that we want. We can go by the field name. A lot of cases we know what the field name is, and so we're going to want to be able to search on the field name. This is new in NetLink. We can't do that in PowerLink. We can also sort on the or filter on the data type. So it really allows us to narrow it down. One of the things that we can do is we can close part of the screen to give us a little more room to work. This is the same thing we can do in PowerLink. Okay, this is our expanded. If you'll notice that it's cleaner and crisper, there are no tabs. So here we've got relational operator, equality and inequality, logical operator. So all these are going to be exposed, if you will, on the screen. So this is going to set each one up differently as we go from a constant value to a list or field value or range, much like this. So we did see a difference there. Multiple tabs, and now we're down to single card. And all the capabilities are there as well. Okay, personalizing the view, or a second video on this. So this is going to be a new feature. You're going to see a new feature. We have the ability now in PowerLink that when we hover over a definition, it's going to show us what's in there. So these are going to be our views, and it's going to show us exactly what's in here. In this case, we have the item, warehouse, and site. So you'll see the fields or columns associated with it. Then we go down to planning, and we have lots of columns in there. So we can see that. And this is in NetLink, and it's not in PowerLink. You're not going to be in PowerLink. Most of the functions are very similar. We're looking at the available attributes on top and the ones we use on the bottom. We have our column details where we set our presentation width, where we can go in and set quick change. These are going to be on two separate cards on two tabs, but it comes up embedded in our screen. So as we're looking at this, you can make your changes, and you don't necessarily need to have a save button because it's going to save it automatically. If you change your mind, you have the choice of hitting cancel up here or reset. So this will reset a single column. If you'll notice here, we're looking at the various views, and one of which is a split view, and we're going to get to that. The next view is going to be our freeze columns, and we're going to get to that as well. So we essentially build our view much like we do in PowerLink. Okay, now we're going to show the freeze columns, And so what we've done is we've populated the view with more columns where it'll look better in the demo. So now when we go back and we launch this view, made our changes. Now the first thing you'll notice is there's a line running down here. This says that on the left-hand side of that line, these columns are frozen. The right-hand side of the line, we're going to scroll. And here we go. I think that's sweet. Our next topic is the one that we've waited a long time for. This is our export. This is going to give us the ability to export to all the major spreadsheets on the market. So we simply go and we look at our choices. We have export to spreadsheet. We have export to HTML. We have export to text. And then we have advanced. And this is all a NetLink exclusive. So we're gonna select the advanced. And this just tells us there's a lot of records that we're doing. This is where we can do the fundamental setup. Okay, how we want this done. We want to send it to a clipboard or a file. How we want to suppress the padding, so on and so forth. This is usually done once. Okay, and then you set it and forget it. So we're going to select an HTML. And we picked this particular file. This is the list view for purchase orders. We picked that because it has a lot of these icons in it, which represent various checkboxes. We put icons in there. So it makes it end up from a record standpoint to be a little more robust record. And this is the HTML output. You have exactly the record. You have it in a grid format. Quite attractive. From here, naturally you can email it. You can save it. You can convert it to a PDF. But it basically exported all the records we had in there. The next choice you want to go to is we want to export, to a spreadsheet. So we went through, we created the file, we downloaded the file, the virus checker went in and tested it. When we opened the file, it automatically launched Excel. Excel is our default spreadsheet, but if yours is not, you'll notice that the document we created is an ODS document, which is Open Document Spreadsheet, and can be opened by most of the major spreadsheet developers, including Excel, Google Sheets, and OpenOffice. So this is really much broader than simply Excel. It can be opened in any of the most common spreadsheets. And as you can see, it exported all the icons and check marks and all the kinds of things we had in there. Next topic is mass change. In this video, we're going to talk about mass actions, and there's about 200 of these. And so what you're going to see first is we're going to look at a template. And so we now have a template into our mass change. In this case, we're going to take the planning date and move it out 7 days. So we pick the fields. We have our template. We have our template selection here, and we can create a new template here if we'd like. We can define or name our transaction for the mass change. We now have our card attributes. We selected the field to change, and now what do we want to do with it? We can have since we're doing a date, this is a date field, and it automatically detected that it's a date field, and it said, okay, what do you want to do? We want to do a calculated date. We want to add, in this case, we're going to add days or weeks. We're going to add 1 week, and it's going to move it out. So what have we done here? We've simplified this. If you've ever used it, prior to the NetLink development, we used to actually list out all the variations of dates. Minus 1 month, plus 1 month, minus 2 months, minus 3 months, minus weeks, minus days, and even spelled out to individual days, minus 1 day, minus 2 days, minus 3 days. So we basically got rid of those. There were 62 choices. And we truly made it simpler, and we reduced it to down to like 7 choices now. So it's very easy to set this up. Now, given that this is my demo database, we opted not to update this. So it's going to do it for every financial transaction. We don't want to do that. We just wanted to show the process of setting up a mass change for performing that inside here. So now we're going to do a mass change. We moved to the financial transactions. Financial transactions are a bit more complex, and they're based on a lot more complex rules. So what we're going to do is we're going to randomly select a bunch of financial transactions, and we're going to say we want to change the batch ID. And so we'll go in, we've selected our records. We're going to go into mass change. Okay. And this is the mass change batch ID. And if you'll notice, it's going to show us the ones that we can change. Then it's going to show us the ones that we can't change. So we'll go to Unable to Change tab, and you'll notice as we highlight on each one of them, it's going to explain to us why. I mean, some of the batches are closed, some of them's posted, some of them you can't post a batch ID to the ledger entry, okay? So which is all well and good. And again, we're not going to perform this, but it's a mass change and would go in and change everything. Change the ones we had highlighted. This next one is real exciting to me. This is very close to workbenches, and you'll see as we're going through this that there's some significant enhancements off of it. We call it styles, and you'll be able to see a great deal more flexibility in processing this. So let's begin by pointing out in the upper right-hand corner this small gear. When we select that gear, we're going to go in and we can do things like look at a list, look at a graph, and look at a split. So what we're doing is we're looking at a list of buyers, and we're going to go in and we're going to do a split. What the split does is bring the default card and places it on top of the current screen that we have up. We now have multiple windows going into XA. So we have a compound card, which is the default for buyers. When you double click on it, this is the card you would see. We then brought it in, and as we select a buyer, it's going to update all the information in this compound card. So let's kind of walk through some of these. So now in our compound card, we have buyers here. We have the characteristics of the buyer. We have the items they buy. And here we have an overview of the activity. We have requisitions, active POs, completed POs. And as we select a buyer, it's going to update the information for that specific buyer. Very, very workbench-ish. So now we can actually go in. This is created via a workbench, and we're going to kind of step through this. If you noticed, when we selected the demo, that actually gave us a list of what was included in that card file. Again, new to NetLink. We're going to edit that. And as we look at this, we see this is normal workspace. If you've built any workspaces in the past, this is normal workspace with the big difference of split view. So just like you're able to set up your defaults for the presentation, what kind of initial view, initial subset, navigation, what you want to do. In the past, all these were separate tabs. It's now on one single screen, so we can go in, we can look at it, and we can change it. This is our split view. So when we select the split, this is what we're going to see. We saw initial card file was called demo. And when we look at the graphs, we're going to see orders, average orders. So we basically now, this is how we define our split. Very straightforward, very simple, much easier than some of the things we'd created in PowerLink. This is going to be our fine definition as well. This is our menu. This is actually a WYSIWYG. We can go in and we can select what we want displayed or what we want for display and maintain. We simply edit the list. This is going to go through, and this is going to be what our toolbar looks like. Here we have maintenance history. We're going to get into a little more detail of that. We're going to get into where used and last used. That's in a upcoming video. Okay, so we selected our buyer, and we have the advantage, because this is inside Mingle, that we can go in and we can actually use our in context on the sidebar. So we have this buyer selected. We then have information about that buyer. As we change buyers, we're going to change information. We have a list of our purchase orders. Now, here's where I feel this part of the styles, the view styles, are going to surpass the workbenches. And that is, as we select a record in one of the compound card list views, it's then going to propagate that and dynamically open the information related to this purchase order in context. Likewise, when we move over here to select this item, so we could scroll down these and we would change the information here. So now what we've got on the screen as we're looking at this is we have our, what I call the anchor, right? These are our buyers, and I can select the buyer and I can look at buyer performance. I then have these 3 screens that are built in my compound card. So at this point we have 4 screens up. We then add these 3, and this gives us 7 screens that we're displaying right now related to whatever area we choose. You know, if we tried to do the same thing, bouncing around this compound card in PowerLink, we'd have a dozen screens open up when we got done. So let's kind of watch it as it dynamically changes. We brought up the PO information. Here's the vendor against that PO, the warehouse information, purchase order information down here. So now we've just changed our buyer, and there's our buyer performance, as well as any MRP recommendations. We're going to select an item, and now all the information about that item revision is here. If you'll notice up in the small box here, the in context box, we actually can change our view, our subsets and sorts from here, and we can change our perspective in the cards. So we can change our data. This is live. So if we went in and we selected one of these items, we could go into the line item or the item itself in the item revision. So lots and lots of power, lots and lots of flexibility now with what we can do. And remember, this in the center is simply a compound card. And so we put 3 cards on there for a compound card, but you know how complex we can grow these. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Let's take a quick look at a graph. This graph happens to be the average order size. And it seems like one person is overwhelmingly higher average than anyone else. Okay, so we're down to the last 2. We're going to look at the definitions history. Okay, here we're going to look at the definitions history. We just looked at our buyer card, and we're going to look at the demo, which is our list file. And here we have maintenance history, where used, and last used. So if we look at maintenance history, we can now see that the first one was a change, and then the second one was a create. As we drill into the change, we're able to see what was changed. So the item revision was changed there. And here we're going to take a look at the view that was created when it was created. Where used, this is kind of interesting. In a lot of cases, this was a customer request. In a lot of cases, we'll have a list card or a view or, you know, those kinds of things used in multiple places. The more this propagates itself, the more and more that this could be an issue. We don't want to go in and change a list when we find that it's being used on, you know, perhaps hundreds of different card files or in hundreds of different areas. So here we can see where it's used. Another area, especially in the whole notion of keeping the system uncluttered, is we want to know when something was last used. So if it was created and used once and never used again, or hasn't been used in 3 years, then probably it's not necessary anymore. Fortunately, we can see what user is using that, and just go and ask that person, is it any value, and remove it and unclutter it from the system. Here's where we're actually going to go in, and we're going to show an example of a change and how that's going to come back. So we're going to add a header message called test. We're then going to save it. We're going to go into the history, and it shows that we did a change. It then says exactly what the header message was, or what the change was. And so now we have complete visibility now of all the activities done within the views and subsets. And finally, our last one, preferences. Okay, let's start with a review or a refresher on how we do things in PowerLink. So as we look at this, we're on the main browser, and we select preferences, and we can have selections for applications, our font size, then our main browser. Again, what card file we want to start with, what's our initial card, what our tab style is, and then we look at miscellaneous. Again, tab style, various navigation, what our history is, how much we can export at a given period of time, open actions, and all these are going to be on all these multiple cards. And then our message dialog, do you want to have the validation messages or confirmation messages? So that's how it's done inside of PowerLink. We now go into item warehouses, and we're going to go into customize. We now have preferences and global preferences. So let's go down. Let's take a look at global preferences. And the global preferences are what we looked at on the main browser menu. Now we've simplified this. A lot cleaner, a lot crisper. And now we have our main browser. We have our lists, our card files, all of our attributes, how we want things to confirm, the amount we want exported. So we've moved this all to a single window now, and makes it a little bit cleaner. We now go to the user preferences. Here's same sort of thing. This looks almost exactly like PowerLink, only with a different internet view on it. Same things are here in each one of these areas. One difference as we're looking at this is, if I can draw your attention to the middle, you see that we have mingle in context app cards. And what this is these are going to be the cards that show up on the sidebar in the in context. So you can actually define your own cards and see exactly the information you want to see and display those as you're going through this. So you define those yourself, much like defining a workbench, so we can define it very robust. And as I mentioned, as we were looking at that, each one of the different areas, so we looked at purchase orders and we looked at items. And in each case, it popped up a specific related information. So when we clicked on items, it told us about item detail. We went to item revisions. And when we did the purchase order, we looked at the purchase order lines and items and things like that. So we're able to dynamically switch from card to card and area to area, and this is where these are defined. And then on define, we actually can have defined on every attribute the way that you want it to look. So we can set up the views, the subset, and sorts on your finds. And then, of course, maintenance history on all the activity. So the next are a couple of things that are out there now, and we wanted to do a comparison between PowerLink and NetLink. So here we have a compound card editor, and basically we have the multiple tabs here, selecting the boxes that we want, and then we go in and we find the card that we're going to use to build our compound card. Made it a little bit easier, made it a single card. Based on what you select here, you could go in and have your multiple cards that you want, and then we're going to show you the tables, and then you're able to define each one of these. A little bit crisper, a little bit cleaner to use. Some of the applications, we've made enhancements to some of the applications. For example, manufacturing orders, receipt of material. As you may know, we go through this small wizard that basically takes us, boom, 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 1, 2, 3 in closing a manufacturing order. This is the same thing in NetLink, going to look very similar. Here's our material complete. We have a normal close. So again, we go through all the steps in the wizard in NetLink, very much like we do it in PowerLink. Labor complete. We also have the ability now for the first time to convert a requisition to a purchase order. We simply highlight the requisition or requisitions, okay, and then do a right mouse and say create purchase order. So here's our purchase order. This is going to be the order itself, the header information, who are buyer, vendor, so on and so forth. This is going to be the items on the purchase order. And this is going to be the templates that we're using. So we have various templates based on how we want to enter the items. So kind of in review, we looked at the user definition editors. We now see the ability to create views and subsets and sorts in PowerLink. We can do temporary and cascading. We can create and modify card files, cards and card files, all the various types of cards. We saw the editors for compound cards, which is a WYSIWYG type. We looked a little bit at workspaces and how you define some of the styles. We looked at the templates and mass change templates. We talked about presentation schemas. We saw setting up favorites, export. This is awesome. Direct export to Excel, and it's quick. It's easy and direct, not just Excel, but to all the popular spreadsheet developers. We saw setting our preferences, our user profile preference maintenance, the where used, the maintenance history, and last used for our user definitions like views and subsets. We looked at the filter row, which is really sweet. We saw the ability to freeze some of the columns and scroll for the rest of them. We saw the different styles where we actually came in and saw some ways of getting the same end result as we did with workbenches. We have the other controls that we didn't talk about were the attachment and email. So I want to thank you very much for spending time with me and going through this. For additional information on XA products, you can go to infor.com/products/XA. Thank you.